What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I just got done listening to a good 10 minutes of super lefty talk radio. And I don't listen to a ton of super lefty talk radio. I listen to some stuff from the right, but not really, because I really don't like either side. I see them as the same thing. They could argue that back and forth, but I don't see any difference. They're both parties are for unlimited spending. Both parties are for arming Ukraine warlords. Both parties are for enriching the elites at the expense of the middle class and the poor. Both parties yield to the banking class. The banking class is literally running our society and just hollowing out our manufacturing and all that from the core. And we're at this spot at the end of a fiat currency cycle where things are, the material condition of the nation, of the empire, if you would, is decreasing. We're in a spot where it's contracting, which means the pie is no longer growing, the pie is now contracting. And so as individuals, what can we do about it? And as an individual, well, we can be as self-sovereign as we possibly can. We can look at our number one resource, which is our time and our attention, which is why I thank you guys for being here and giving me your attention. And I try to be a good steward of that and bring you value that you listen to and you're like, oh, you know, I didn't think of it like that before. Or I came away with something. I try to give something in return for, at some point in time, maybe having a product or a service, or I do coaching calls, or I sell gold and silver, and that's an ask. And I want to serve other people in doing that, and going, hey guys, this fiat currency system is going to literally implode. Also, you can get canceled, shut down at any point in time. That's a major problem. We need to fix this. I think that is going to be the calling of the millennial generation, to fix these things, like blockchain voting. Why aren't we doing it? You know what I mean? Like, why aren't we dividing real estate in NFTs and we're able to transfer property ownership really easily, and we wouldn't have to go into debt to obtain it. We could just go and buy, a piece of real estate, a cash flowing piece of real estate, a hotel on a beach, if you will, and buy a 1,000th share of it without being a one owner, 10% down, 50% down, finance things, like where you're really, certain people don't have access to that, but certain people have a lot of access to that. And so as they currency print, real estate values go up, they're able to refinance it, pull out that equity, because it's debt, they don't have to pay any taxes on the gains, and then the people that are renting the piece of real estate are then paying the mortgage, paying back the debt, and the equity holder is being enriched quite substantially. I think that we're going to muddle through over the next decade, maybe two, and get to a more equitable society. At least I hope so. The problem with communism or socialism as economic structures is that they typically make everyone equally poor. They don't typically make everyone equally wealthy or abundant. Capitalism kind of starts out where it's a pretty good equitable system, but it does end with like a Monopoly game. At the end of the game, like somebody's got all the hotels and red houses, and most people don't have anything. And we're kind of at that spot. A lot of that has to do with the super elites are close to the currency printer, so they're able to take some of that currency for themselves, get the spending power, spend it, and then everyone else gets the inflated and less purchasing power as they get the second-hand dollars, as they trickle down, if you will. And so we're in this spot where I think it's important to listen to both sides. Not that you have to adopt their thinking or their philosophy, but you have to understand their side so that you can argue against their side. And we are at a spot where we're going to have to fight out, and then we're going to have to argue out, how should we divide the resources? How should we treat these people and these people? We're going to have to figure that out. Unfortunately, when you live in an empire where the material condition of the empire is eroding, so it's not collapsing. To me, a collapse is like down to zero. It's like a Jenga tower. It just collapsed. It's down. It's zero. But we're in decline. It's obvious that we're in decline. There's a lot of things that will point to a decline. A devaluing currency, for example, a hollowing out of your middle class, a lack of manufacturing ability, higher energy prices relative to human wages, these type of things. So we're in decline. I don't think that there's any denying it. And so typically what happens is the pie shrinks, people fight, there's a clear winner, the winner makes the rules, and you move forward into a peaceful society. And it's peaceful because no one dares challenge the winner after they win, because one side has been destroyed or damn near it probably both sides have been really affected, but one side is a clear winner, and therefore their power, they're more powerfully, or they have more power, they hold more power than the other side, and therefore there's a moment of peace, and that'll last for 20 years or so, and then things will start again. You'll get another few generations out of it, and then you get to one of these big fourth turning cycles, which is where we're at. I actually linked to a couple books below. One of them is The Fourth Turning. I think it is a great book to understand what is going on and where we're at. Well, we happen to be in one, and we're in a fourth turning. What I took away from this lefty conversation was they talked about price caps on oil companies. They were going, well, if the oil companies weren't making record profits, there would be lower fuel prices. And I just don't think it's like that at all. No one remembers when oil was negative and these oil companies were taking loans to pay their dividends, particularly Exxon. And even though that was only 2 years ago. And people forget that 2016, these oil companies were at a break even. People forget that all of the investment that they made in 2016, they're now reaping the rewards of in 2022. But people also aren't aware that the oil company industry as a whole is not really investing in further increasing supply, because why would they? Like your presidential office hates you, Congress hates you, the American people hate you. Like why would you invest? Why wouldn't you just harvest what you have, and as well as deplete, just don't bring new ones online? And that's essentially what's happening. That will cause a further erosion of the middle class and cause further wealth gaps, because there are equity owners like you and I can go buy Exxon stock, XOB or XOM. It's done really well. It's got a 5% dividends, pretty good. And then there are other people who can barely afford to pay for fuel for their cars, and so they're not buying shares, they're buying fuel. And I buy fuel, but I try to buy more shares than I do fuel, as a way of counteracting my fuel. My thinking there is, as fuel goes up, these oil companies will, the revenue will be going to them. It will be represented in their dividend, and so therefore, if I own enough of it, maybe I can offset or reduce my risk to crazy oil prices from a lack of supply in the future. But I'm still in a spot where I spend more on fuel than I do buying oil companies. But that is one way that I hedge my bets. You can do this with telecommunications as well. You have a cell phone and you're like, okay, I want to offset my bill. You can buy AT&T or Verizon, take the dividend and use it to pay for your bill. How many shares of stock do you need to own depends on the dividend, depends on your phone bill. But you could do the math backwards and figure out what would it cost to have a free phone, meaning whether the price comes up or down, I'm zeroed out because the cell phone company pays me a dividend and that pays my bill. I think about that with oil. But we're at a spot where the average American guy doesn't understand that price controls are a good way to decrease the supply and get no solution. So maybe you can cap prices, but you'll have no supply. And I would rather have crazy prices and access to anything I want, with being inside of a voluntary transaction to purchase or not purchase, or change my behavior. Maybe I don't need to drive around an F-250. Maybe I can drive around a Prius or a Civic. I like the Insights, the Civics. I like the Yoda. I'm a fan of the Camry. But I'd rather have that option. I'd rather, as an individual, have that option. I'd rather have it forced down my throat. Nope, you can't get fuel for your Camry or your F-250 because we've capped the price of fuel at 50 cents. It's a crazy example, but you can imagine how much will be at the pumps at 50 cents. Zero. Well, that's the same is true at $5 or $10. There's only so much that will be produced at each level, and companies will produce it up until the point where they start to go negative on their earnings. And once they're destroying value, once it's taking more resources more resources to produce something than it is that they can sell something for, then basic economics would tell us in the long run, perhaps in the short run, supply will decrease until they come back into equilibrium. The unfortunate thing is the average American guy doesn't understand this, and the average American politician certainly doesn't understand this. And so what can you and I do? What are the action takeaways? What can you and I do? We can become as self-sovereign as we possibly can. Get out of the system as much as you can. Become as self-reliant as you possibly can. Everybody needs to trade with somebody for whatever it is that they need. But try to be as self-sovereign and as reliant as you can on yourself. You cannot be a victim. That's like number 2. Like, don't be a victim. Like, victims are fake and gang. It's our entire country is, oh, I'm a victim, oh, pity me, oh, pity. And it's like, nobody cares, right? Nobody cares, especially you young guys. You will learn later in life that women don't really care about victimhood. Like, oh, well, this happened, and then my buddy screwed me over, and then this, like, no. Women hang at the finish line and select the winners. They don't care about the struggle. They care about the results. And you can complain about the struggle. Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to be a young guy these days. Well, nobody cares. All right, nobody cares. So, and anyone who does care, you don't want to hang out with them anyway. Those are not the type of people you want to hang out with. So, become self-reliant. Get ready for really hard times, like really hard times, and then figure out where you're going to direct your time and attention. That's the number one resource any of us have. What are we investing our time and our attention into? Are we doing something positive that's going to increase our own personal prosperity, increase other people's prosperity? Okay, is there a way that we can serve other people, and by serving other people, reap rewards for ourselves? We call those in economics profits. Profits come from you investing your time in capital and labor and skills and making something out of nothing, whether it's peanut butter, jelly, and bread, and putting them together where, A plus B plus C equals more than D. It equals more than that. It equals that profit part. And then a guy like me going down the street is like, oh my goodness, look at this. I can trade my $5 for a ready-made sandwich. How great is this? One guy has a profit. I have a sandwich. I didn't have to do anything besides trade this, and I might have been able to trade something else for that $5, and you guys get baby economics. You understand how it works. I can go trade my time doing something else, and I can trade it for somebody else's time and resources, and by that mutual trade and exchange and diversification of labor, we all become wealthier. That's the basics of economics. But we don't live at a time where people are going to understand that. We live at a time where the pie is shrinking, and when it shrinks, people fight. And they typically say, oh, you're a white supremacist. And they say, well, you're a racist. Or I guess, are those the same thing? I'm not sure. Oh, well, you're a libtard. They go back and forth. And at the end of it, normally it gets violent. Normally the side that holds the power of the government at that point in time typically wins. I hate to tell you guys that on the right, but your government's probably going to try to kill you at some point in time. It's pretty obvious. I mean, they're literally telling you that. Like, your president says, I don't think he's aware that we don't use the F-15 anymore, but he's like, well, we have the F-15, so be careful there. It's like, okay, man, sorry, bro. Didn't want to wrinkle the F-15 there, bro. Then please don't bomb my church or synagogue, my man. But we're at that spot where it's important to become self-sovereign. That's my message to you guys. Don't be a victim. Become self-sovereign. I'll see you down in the comments below. And until the next video, you guys have a great one. Peace.